today is our final session on exploring the principles of universal design for learning, and we're focusing on that third component, multiple means of action and expression. For those of you who have been to the Universal Design for Learning workshops before, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you. And for those of you that are new to the sessions, we're excited to have you as well. The prior two sessions were recorded and they're available at our website. And the UDL, the URL for our website is www.niu.edu/facdev. That's where the recordings will be available for the prior two sessions. My name is Dr. Yvonne Johnson, and I will be joined today by my colleague, Dr. Dan Cabrera. I serve as the Multimodal Teaching Coordinator in the Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center at NIU. And NIU is active in social media. If you want to, Mike, did you have a question, or were you just acknowledging that you could hear me? Okay, I guess that's acknowledgement that you can hear me. Okay, thank you, Mike. As I said, Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center is active in social media. So if you would like to engage with us, follow us on Facebook or Twitter. We are happy to collaborate with you. I am joined today by my colleague, Dr. Dan Cabrera. He is the Multimedia Coordinator in the Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center.
Greetings, everyone.
Thank you, Dan. To provide just a brief review, for some of you are new to the Universal Design for Learning sessions today, so we'll have a couple of slides where we review, but most of the slides today will be focused on our new topic. The Universal Design for Learning focuses on material that is usable by all students without the need for adaptation or specialized design. So we want to create material that can support all different students from the very beginning, and that we don't have to revise and adapt over time. And in the previous two Universal Design for Learning workshops, we talked about design principles of instruction related to how you can design instructional materials, facilities, strategies such as syllabus design, which we'll talk a little bit about today, lectures, discussions, lab work, field work. There are many different opportunities for us to design instruction that is usable by all students, incorporating these universal design principles. And we'll show you some of those different techniques today. And in reviewing, universal design curriculum provides all the students from a wide range of abilities, disabilities, different ethnic backgrounds, language skills, learning styles. We're trying to help them with their engagement, representation, action, and expression, which are all universal design for learning words and focuses. We're trying to help them all be successful in our very diverse 21st century classrooms. We have gained quite a bit of resources from the CAST organization, and they have resources that are free and usable by all of us. They have lesson builders that you can use. And to give you the context from which we're coming in these Universal Design for Learning sessions, CAST believes that the barriers to learning arise when learners are interacting with inflexible educational goals and materials and methods. So we try to provide a wide range of different opportunities for students to support their learning and to create a more flexible, dynamic learning environment. And we do thank CAST for sharing their resources with all of us. Today, as I said, we're going to be talking about the third component of the Universal Design for Learning concepts. And today we're going to be focusing on multiple means of action and expression. In our prior workshops, the first one, which we hosted in February, we talked about the affective dimensions of learning. And the affective dimensions connect with the why of learning. Why are we teaching students this? Why is this information important to them? And then in our workshop in March, we talked about multiple means of representation, the recognition aspects, the what of learning. What are they learning? What is important? And today we're going to look at the strategic, the representation, the action and expression. And during our discussion today, we'll address strategies for supporting learners as they're planning and performing tasks. And we connect that with executive functioning skills. I'll introduce material connected with the executive functioning aspects of universal design for learning. And then my colleague, Dan Cabrera, will discuss different ways that students can express their knowledge during the latter part of today's workshop. So we're trying to create engaging, supportive, inclusive 21st century learning environments. To provide support and different options for students, I've developed a wide range of different strategies in teaching. And over the years, I've developed more and more structures to support planning and strategy development for students. When we talk about the neural networks, which the universal design for learning concepts are based upon those neural networks. And when you saw the 3 different universal design concepts, you saw that a different part of the brain was highlighted. Those are the neural networks that are connected with the universal design for learning. So you can see that for the action and expression that we're discussing today, this is the part of the brain that we're focusing on. The prior workshops, we focused on other aspects of the neural networks. In terms of executive functioning, we want to support students, the strategies that they develop to be successful in courses. We want to help them set appropriate goals and help them develop capacity for monitoring their own progress. When we're talking about executive functioning, consider how can you support them? We're going to look at some templates that I use and I've developed for my course. I teach educational research courses. I also teach educational technology courses. And in the educational research courses, I've developed a number of different structures to support students planning in their strategy development. Many of the courses that I teach are in accelerated formats, so they may be 8 weeks, they may be 7 weeks, they may be 3 weekends. So they have very concentrated schedules and they have very high workload. So it's very important to help students. I provide them different structures to help them plan so that they can be successful when they're developing strategies to move through the course. One of the things that I find in terms of my graduate students and all the students really is that when they come into the course, they get excited about the research and they set very lofty goals. They want to create a very complex research proposal and strategies, and the plans are excellent. I have to help them to focus their projects and develop appropriate goals, because often the plans that they want to try to complete within a 7-week course, it's just unrealistic. So I help them to narrow the focus and get more in depth on all of the aspects of the research process so that they can gain in-depth knowledge and set appropriate goals that can be achieved and that they can be successful within those 7 or 8 week sessions. And that they're going to get out of it what they need for their future advanced courses. And students have said that it helps them to, when I do help them focus, that they appreciate that they're not getting confused by addressing a lot of extraneous information that doesn't necessarily help them with their strategic development or achieving their goals. Other things related to executive functioning are helping them to plan and organize. And I'll show you a template that I use. Also, help them develop strategies to achieve their goals. So if a student is struggling, there are different ways that we can help them move along to achieve their goals. Sometimes it's difficult for students to prioritize, and they can often get distracted in this time that we live in that is information dense, and we rapidly receive information from many, many different sources. So I try to provide structures to support their executive functioning so that they can focus on what's important, what goals they need to set, what they need to learn to support their graduate education and to be successful. And I help them to, throughout the course, they are receiving less support. Their skills in executive functioning are increasing, they're improving. And so over time, the students can be more effective at monitoring their own progress. And that's a very specific strategy that I use to kind of scaffold them through their projects and help them to gain skills in independence and self-directed learning. In terms of planning and strategy development, all of our courses have a syllabus, a course schedule. We use different ways to communicate with students. We set up routines. The course has a certain structure, and there are assessments. And Dr. Cabrera is going to talk about assessments more at the end of this session. In terms of the syllabus, there are ways that you can structure a syllabus to make sure that students understand how the course, the expectations and all the critical information that needs to be in the syllabus. And one of the things that is available on the CAST site, so I'm not going to go into it as much today because the resources available on the CAST site there actually is quite an extensive resource that can show you how to develop a universally designed a syllabus that incorporates the universal design for learning principles. So in that syllabus, you'll see it's a syllabus that is available online, and so there are different tools that you can use when you're sharing an interactive syllabus online. For instance, you can use a video introduction of yourself, and that helps to you to connect with the students. You can explain how the syllabus is designed, and it is another way to incorporate multimedia into even the syllabus of your course. One of the important things about a syllabus is that to help with the executive functioning and the planning and strategy development, it's very important that you can show that there are alignments between the course objectives and the assignments. The students understand that there are course objectives and there are assignments connected with that. If they can see a clear relationship, then that helps their executive functioning. They can plan for that. They can say, okay, I understand how this assignment helps me to learn this course objective, and they can be more successful. If the syllabus is not clearly set up and there's not alignments between the assignments and the course objectives, then students will become confused. And it's important that we have all of these alignments clear so that they can focus on what is important in the class and not waste time on because they're not clear on what the expectations of the course. Another thing that I do is I set up a very clear course schedule. I have the course developed before it even opens, and then I share a course schedule, which I'll show you in a little bit. And I've found that students appreciate that very much. And during the first session, I've seen this over and over again. They get out their smartphones or their iPads or their various devices, and they put in the assignments and the due dates, and they put that in right away in their electronic calendar. And they come to expect that, and they know when their assignments are due. And most of the time I don't change it unless there's some valid reason to change the dates. Then I will, and I'll discuss it with the class. But students really use that to support their planning and strategic development. One of the things that I do in my courses is I set up regular communication, and I set up routines and patterns. And many of the courses that I teach are either fully online or they're blended, where we have some face-to-face sessions and we have some sessions where we meet synchronously online or asynchronously online. But I've learned over the years that it's very important that instructors regularly share information with students, and that students feel that they can ask the instructor questions. And so I have a pattern. I have a routine. I will share an announcement at the beginning of every week and share what the objectives of the course are, of the objectives of the particular week, the specific assignments, the activities that they need to engage in. And the pattern is consistent. So students get into a routine, and they see that as they're going through the different weeks of the course, we have the same routine. I don't change the due dates. So if assignments are due on Thursday at 11:59 p.m., then they stay due on Thursday at 11:59 p.m. So students over time become more able to meet those predictable guidelines. The course structure is very clear, and it's set up very clearly in the syllabus and is set up clearly in the Blackboard system, which we use extensively at NIU. And for those of us from other universities and other organizations that are online, you can set up that in whatever learning management system you use. And assessments are clearly aligned with those learning objectives, with the course objectives, the weekly objectives. And students are much more successful because they understand how everything fits together. Okay, this is an example of just one piece of a course schedule that I use. And I provide this as an addendum to the syllabus. So you can see that it's a very structured plan. There's modules. I tell them the dates, the topics, and then there are the specific readings, activities, due dates, and I try to keep it one page front and back if I can. That's a little harder to do in a 16-week course, but generally I can do that in a 8-week or 7-week course. But students understand right away what we're going to be studying. They know what the readings are. They know if there's a discussion board. They know if they're talking about ethics, or if we're talking about IRB and how that fits with the research process. And I found that students really, really like a structure like this. So I've continued to use this and revise it over the past 5 years. And it really has helped students to be successful, and they're clear on where we're going with the course. Now, to have a brief activity, what strategies do you use to help students understand how your course is organized? You could type your answer on the whiteboard. This is a whiteboard screen here. So you can type your answer on the whiteboard, or you can type it in the chat box. So you've seen that we use course structures, a template for that. What other things do people use to help students understand? Do you use certain techniques in? Okay, so a syllabus. Some people use syllabus to help. Okay. Um, so what do you do in your syllabus to help with that? Help students organize. Okay. Okay. So there's a schedule. Okay. Um, do any of you think that you could use something like this in your course? It does require that you have to have the course designed when you start the course, but does this look like something that you might consider in your course? Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, so we have people are saying that they can. Okay, awesome, great. Thank you. Okay, so another aspect of executive functioning relates to goal setting. And there are different ways that you can incorporate structure in your course to help students with the goal setting. So weekly objectives are something that you can use to help students to focus on what is important for that week. Over the years, I've developed a number of different graphic organizers which help students who have, some students do fine with text, some students like a graphic organizer, some students like templates for their assignments. And I've learned that having a variety of these different templates and structures really does help the students in terms of support and resources. They're much more effective at monitoring their progress. And in that process, I also incorporate formative and formative low stakes assessments to give them feedback on their various assignments. And when you have these weekly objectives and assignment templates and various support, it helps students because you're modeling goal setting, you're modeling different learning strategies, you're modeling how they can monitor their progress. And then over time, they can develop their own templates and they can become more self-directed and independent and better at their executive functioning. And then they can monitor their own progress and they don't always have to depend upon an external source. And one of the things that I do is I teach a research proposal development course, and I've redesigned the course and broken it up into separate modules where each module is basically a mini practice of a section of the full research proposal paper, which is due at the end of the class, and that's a significant assignment with a lot of points. But what Cynthia, okay, checking out the guess. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that, Cynthia. I'm glad you checked out the CAST site. So I've broken down the research proposal paper. Okay, Sonoma. Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Into these separate assignments, and I'm basically scaffolding the students along the process of developing a research project. So each week, they're focusing on a different aspect of research, whether it's the literature review or model qualitative research or quantitative research, data collection methods. And so they've focused on those components of the research process, and then each week they get formative feedback from me, and I can guide them and explain, okay, you need to look a little bit more at this aspect, or that's great, keep moving along on that path. And so they're not waiting until the 6th week of the course to start their project, which I learned that it kind of is human nature, at least with the students that I've worked with. They did kind of wait until near the end of the course to start on that big project. So to try to help with their executive functioning and help them to be successful in the course, I decided to break up the course into these weekly objectives that are many parts of the major project for the end of the course. They're monitoring their progress. They can see how they're doing on these different mini activities, and they're getting feedback. So they feel that their questions are being answered, and they're much more successful. The papers are much better than they, as they've gotten through these, using these templates and objectives and different types of support. So this is a template. I made it smaller so that it could be on the screen, but you can see that it focuses people on the different important aspects of research, okay? What's your research question? What's the hypothesis? What's the population? So it helps them to focus on what's the sample. So then when they're reading and they're working on their assignments, they are looking at all these different key aspects of research, and it's clear to them. And I help them to reflect by asking them, okay, what is a strength and a possible weakness of the method that you're choosing? So it's kind of this structure that helps them to work with in depth on their project, but within these broader parameters, and it has been very helpful to them. And then they use the feedback that I give them on these weekly assignments when they're developing that full research proposal paper, and they're much more likely to address all of the key aspects of the research proposal and the research process than before we started using these templates. What kind of approaches do you use in your courses for goal setting? Okay, so somebody uses weekly objectives. Okay, great. Different due dates for modules. Okay, all right. Anything else? Okay, so those are different ideas that you could use. Weekly objectives, different due dates for modules, rather than having a due date near the end of the course. That, okay, a grading rubric. Okay, great. That's a good one to help students with goal setting. And we'll be talking about rubrics. That's a really good segue to our next section. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, you can also use social learning activities to help students to monitor their progress. They can see how they're doing in terms of other students, and they can see that they're having similar experiences as their colleagues in the course. And one of the things that we've implemented at NIU is we started using the new Blackboard Blackboard portfolio tool. And we have workshops on Blackboard portfolios. So if you're interested in using a portfolio in one of your courses, I'd be happy to help you with that. We have some workshops in the summer on that, and a number of professors and different programs at NIU are using the portfolio tool, and it has been implemented for the first and second year English courses and for the UNIV 101 course. So we do have a lot of use, and it's a great way for students to share their work in a social learning type of situation. Okay, so someone mentioned that they use rubrics. How many of you use rubrics in your courses right now? If you could raise your hand. Okay, so we have several people who use rubrics. Okay, several people. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So for those of you that use rubrics, what courses do you use the rubrics for? You can type the course you use a rubric for on the whiteboard. This is a whiteboard activity. Okay, so we have someone who uses it for ethics, teaching methods. Okay. All right. Entrepreneurship, cultural anthropology. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so you can see ethical decision making. Okay, so a number of you are using rubrics. That's great. Those definitely help with the executive functioning that we've been talking about. Okay, Mike, okay, so you're in physics. All right, great. Okay, so almost everyone is using rubrics. That's great. Okay, now when we talk about rubrics, they can assist with you with teaching in terms of setting the expectations, and they help clearly align the grading with the learning outcomes. And okay, Cynthia, all right, so there's a lot of people using rubrics. Thank you. So it's important when you design a rubric that it clearly aligns with the learning outcomes. It really helps with transparency in terms of grading. Okay, great, Dan, thank you. And it can assist with consistent and uniform grading, which it really helps. I've noticed I started using rubrics about 6 years ago, and it really helps the students, and it helps me to make sure that the grading is consistent and uniform, and the students know they really should be able to look at the rubric and determine what grade that they would get based upon the rubric. And I'm going to share a site that has a lot of rubrics. Sometimes rubrics are difficult to develop, so we have a resource. The American Association for Colleges and Universities did a project that included, they developed 16 rubrics, and these are a few of the different rubrics, which can be difficult to develop. So they have one on inquiry and analysis, critical thinking, teamwork, problem solving. One of the people in here, my colleague Dan Cabrera, teaches ethics. So you can see that these rubrics are available, and I'll show you a couple of different samples. This is the critical thinking rubric that's developed, and it's available through the values site, and I'll have it as a resource. So what you can do is you can look at these rubrics, and then you can adapt them for yourself. So there's one on critical thinking, and then there's one on oral communication. Oral communication comes up in most courses, so this could be something that would be valuable to most people. Okay, so just as a quick, we're getting to the end here, and Dan is going to do his session, but just as a quick response, how do students respond when you use rubrics? Do they respond positively? Do they like them? Is it either way? They don't really care either way? Or my students have responded very positively to the rubrics, and a number of you do use rubrics, so I was just wondering. Positive, okay, they like having the clear expectations, yes. And that connects with that. They really appreciate them. Okay, so it seems like we have a positive response to using rubrics. Okay, great. Okay, so we've gone through this. I'm not going to go through this activity because it's time for Dr. Cabrera now. But I do have a number of resources, and these will be available for you, and you'll be able to access them, all of these UDL resources. And we will have a question time at the end. So I would like to thank you all for your engagement in terms of the executive functioning, and I'd like to turn it over to Dan Cabrera. Okay.
Thank you so much, Yvonne.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that. All right. Well, as Yvonne had mentioned, that I will be talking more about multiple means of action and expression. Expression primarily in how you assess your students, or what you have traditionally used as an assessment tool. We'll be talking about alternatives to address the issue that UDL addresses, which is invariability. Students that are not all have the same level of skills in certain areas. So once again, my name is Dan Cabrera, and I'm the Multimedia Coordinator, Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center. I want to acknowledge my primary source for my content today, which is UDL on Campus, and it's a component of cast.org. So I'm going to ask my colleague if she doesn't mind to advance the slides for me. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. And so traditionally, or I should say, text is what the primary modality that we typically turn to when we're asking our students to try to express their understanding of a concept and in terms of our assessing them. We see this in their submitted assignments, and that's primarily because that's how we have decided we want them to show us that they know that they've learned something. In addition, text can also be used as a secondary modality for describing or for enhancing images, video, audio, or other interactive media. So what I'm going to do next, please. What I'm going to do is talk about some of those alternatives means of assessing students. Audio is a very important one. We can offer options as instructors and faculty for students to express their knowledge, such as creating perhaps maybe a podcast or something to mitigate communication barriers. Next, please. We can offer audio production as a way for students to demonstrate knowledge that can lead to creative and insightful outcomes. It's possible that many students feel capable of producing audio. However, there might also be a variety of learners for whom this form of media is not the best demonstration of their knowledge. And as UDL principles suggest, we might want to consider using multimedia as an option for students to demonstrate their knowledge, but also offer other means to avoid inadvertently privileging, excluding, or disengaging our learners. So when possible, we want to teach principles of good audio production if you're using audio as an alternative means of assessment, including how considerations of content and target audience really shape the structure and delivery of their content. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of using, perhaps getting your students to use audio. We could ask them to conduct an interview with a classmate about a particular topic. We can ask them to explain the process and findings from a science experiment. We can make an argument for or against a particular stance. Other examples might include recording journal entries about their personal reflections on a particular topic. Of course, this all depends on the nature of the discipline that you're teaching. We can ask them to react, have an audio recording of their reaction, and respond to various forms of media using tools such as VoiceThread, which a lot of younger students are very comfortable with and are knowledgeable about. We can ask them to record their personal goals for the class and verbalize a plan to obtain those goals, which is in line with what Yvonne was mentioning early on. We can even ask them to conduct an interview with someone in the field, in the professional field, not just an interview with their fellow students, but somebody who actually is a practitioner in the field. So if I'm teaching a course on ethics, they might talk to another professor of ethics. At this point, I want to ask if there's anyone who has used audio as an alternative form of assessment in their course. And I ask you to add that to the chat area. Next slide, please. Okay, Cynthia, she's used podcast in her courses, which is great. I'm a big fan of podcast. When podcast was a component or a building block in Blackboard that was working, I would be using this as a means to reach out to my students. And so they, unfortunately, that building block broke a few years ago in one of their versions, and they never bothered to replace that. But that's fine. That's fine. I can still have students create audio messages to me if in case they want to leave something for me rather than just writing it down. Next slide, please. Thank you, Cynthia. Now, when assessing students' understanding of complex systems and processes, you might want to consider offering the option to have them demonstrate their understanding by creating, and now we're moving into images, by creating images, charts, graphs, maybe some infographics, or some maps. Now, when I talk about incorporating images, I'm not saying to the exclusion of everything else. If anything, it would be in addition to something. So if in fact, if you have an assessment assignment that requires people to have a written a report, they might include more imagery in that report to enhance their demonstration of understanding the concepts. Next slide, please. It turns out that our brain decodes visual information faster than images, or I should say than text. So images can support a narrative and expository content, as well as show a dynamic process of relationships, computations, and even procedures. So our use of photographs, illustrations, charts, graphic images, concept maps, data visualizations, infographics, animated images, and even visual math manipulatives are really examples of image types. So images can successfully convey complex information. They can enhance understanding, and they can improve retention. So images can also engage students more effectively than text. So images can be used as a supplement or as an alternative to text or even audio or video, or they can be used in addition to these media types. If you're using images, then you should also use alternative text or text alternatives to make sure that the images are understandable to individuals who may be visually impaired or have some other disability. So you might want to use, if you're using audio, for instance, you might want to use this text with the image, which includes captions or a transcript. Next slide, please. So what we're doing is really offering the choice for students to use images as a way to demonstrate their knowledge, and it can lead to creative and inspired outcomes. Many times students may be motivated when given the opportunity to produce images. So as a faculty or instructor, you should provide information about attribution. So if they're using, in this case right here, we're not talking about creating an image, but if they're using an image that exists out there, and I get a lot of my images from Flickr, Creative Commons, which is a portion of Flickr, which is just attribution. So I would be asking the students to include any mention of the person who is actually the creator of the image. In this case right here, I have a very long a URL to that particular source. And by the way, this is not a political statement. This is just some images that I thought was rather instructive. Next slide. Many concepts are communicated more effectively with the addition of illustrations, maps, charts, and other types of visual images. So images can provide alternative representations of concepts that may be challenging or difficult to convey. And I want to give this sort of example of an infographics. Now this actually, if I was to use all this just as text, there might not be an easy to grasp understanding, but infographics are able to organize information in a way that is more understandable or immediately understandable than if I tried to use just verbal representation. Turns out that research has shown that when graphics and images are used, it can dramatically improve retention. However, the relationship between the image and the subject really needs to be relevant and congruent. Otherwise, the image can be distracting to the learners. Next slide. In this particular case, I'm combining a text with an image file. Okay, and so here we're saying, so when all hope seems lost, push on. That means you're about to reach a breakthrough in your goal. Okay, and this is by Celestine Chua. In this case right here, you know, if we were going to have an alternative image, the alternative text is not, it would not be considered part of the image. It actually is added to the image, but I'd have to include an alternative text that actually might say what I just read out right here. If individuals are using a screen reader, obviously they wouldn't be able to see the image, but perhaps maybe this alternative text with a description of the image would be very instructive for the students. So it's really it's important to follow accessibility, not just for students with a disability, but for all students. It's also important to follow any copyright and attribution guidelines. If you're using somebody's image, as I mentioned before, you can see that I have in fact included Celestine's Chua's attribution to sort of identify, this is not my image, this is somebody else's image. And I want my students to be able to get used to that practice as well. It's important to put critical information in the text rather than the image sometimes. If you must have text in an image, or as I mentioned, you really want to make sure that it's represented in an accessible way, as Cynthia has also confirmed. It's also always an important thing. I was a member of the Presidential Commission on Persons with Disabilities, so this is a very important thing to me. But I don't want to limit it just to persons with disabilities. In fact, UDL really is to address the issue for persons with a range of abilities and disabilities. It just so happens that it's very instructive and very helpful for students with disabilities. And this goes for students this goes for content that they're creating, as well as my own content that I share with them. Next slide, please. Another alternative form of assessment is including perhaps video as a way. Now, this is actually, we don't go in with our students expecting our students to be master video makers or videographers. And so we really need to consider doing this with a certain sense of perspective and not expecting them to have a Oscar-winning contribution. But faculty and instructors might consider offering students the opportunity to create video as an active way to demonstrate an understanding of the concepts that we've given to them, we've taught them, particularly for those who experience challenges in the area of writing or live presentations. Next slide. Now, evidence suggests that many students view video creation as a valuable and engaging activity. However, like all instructional assignments, students will vary in their perceptions and response in an assignment that involves video creation. For instance, some may find that this is a great way to demonstrate their knowledge while thinking creatively, while others may feel so intimidated by the idea of creating a video that they'll not be able to convey their understanding effectively. So as UDL principles suggest, we need to consider using multimedia as an option for students to demonstrate their knowledge, but offer other means as a way to avoid inadvertently privileging or excluding or disengaging learners. So when possible, teaching principles of good video production include how considerations of content and target audience shape the structure and the delivery of the content in the video. Next slide. So let me give you some examples of how you might have video as an assignment for your students. You may ask them to record a teach-back session where students are asked to explain concepts in their own words. You might ask them to conduct a video interview with someone in the field, like we did with the audio. And this, of course, should just be the addition of video. We might ask them to record quick responses to open-ended questions with a tool like Vine. Okay, Vine, of course, is very big. My daughter uses it all the time. Here's another example I just thought of right now. A few years ago, I had a faculty member who was teaching sign language, and she decided that she wanted to have her students record their signing a particular content. And so she gave them a number of sentences that she had provided them some text, and asked them to sign these and then videotape themselves and then just send that video to them. And of course, I think they used the Helix Media Library to upload the content, which is very, very easy to do. It's one of these best kept secrets on campus, the Helix Media Library. So she was able to assess their performance of signing by videotaping, by having the students videotape them. You can also have the students create a video blog entry to record an experiment and summarize findings, create a mini documentary on a course-related subject, or maybe even just create a multimedia presentation and present it to the class. Has anyone used video in their courses as an alternative means of assessment? I know that it's asking a lot of your students to do that. But if we don't have anyone who has done that, I think I might know a reason why. Next slide, please. Oh, Yvonne says that she's used video students explain the research through video. Great. Thank you so much, Yvonne. This is an example of something that might be supportive of and this is just, of course, one example. Oh, okay. Furkan says, I've asked students to shoot a 2-minute video. Thank you so much. Uh, it's actually not that difficult, and marketing a product idea. Cynthia says, great. Yes, you're welcome, Cynthia. I hope to share. I hope you'll. I will share the links to. I've got this as an example of a video as a rubric for conducting video assignments. I also have two more examples. I was going to put them on here. There is PDFs. So what I might end up doing is just sending everybody after this is over, sending everybody a PDF of this particular, oh, actually, I think up to 3 different rubrics for conducting video projects. It really makes it a lot easier to, because if you know what you're doing with this, with how you're going to be grading this video assignment, your students will feel a whole lot better. And as Yvonne mentioned, it really provides them a guideline for how to do this. It's very, very important. So it's important to include a rubric for grading a video assignment, which can also serve as a guideline for students since they select this particular option. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, and then lastly, and I'll just take another minute to do this because we're almost at the point where we'll be asking you if you have any questions, is the use of web conferencing as a way of having your students demonstrate that they understand something. So when we talk about web conferencing, and since we're using web conferencing right here, it's sort of a good opportunity to just to highlight some of these tools that students can use. There are many built-in features, especially in this version of Blackboard Collaborate. This is Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. It has tools that we've had in the older version, but they're much easier to use. So we have tools for chatting, which we've used a lot in this presentation. For video, of course, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show my video. This is one of the things that I'm not a big fan of video. Let me just share my video here. Okay. Hello, everyone. I didn't want to put you through the pain of watching me through the entire session. Hi, Yvonne. Okay, now I'm going to just turn that off. Thank you so much. Hello, Cynthia. So video is one. Screen sharing. Screen sharing is a great tool. If I have something on my computer that I wanted to share, for instance, if I had a website I wanted to share, if I had some software I wanted to show students how to use, I could actually use video conferencing, or I should say application share in my video conferencing to demonstrate that. Now, the different take on this is having students have them show me and their fellow students something that they've come across. Maybe it's a website that they've come across, or maybe it's something that they put together and they want to share with the rest of the group. So screen sharing or application sharing is really, really good. We've actually had some examples of drawing with Yvonne's presentation, where she's asked you to type in or to draw something or whatever whatever you need to do with the annotation tools, which is also great. So if I have perhaps maybe we'll just use this as an example. This image right here of someone who's at their computer, probably using in a web conference themselves. I'll have students identify a particular. Let's see. I'll ask them, where is the computer? Okay, and I'll have them draw this kind of weird, not really a circle. If I'm teaching a course in neurology and I have a picture of the brain and I say, okay, where's the corpus callosum? Of course, they'd have to have the brain split in half because it's right in the middle of the brain. And ask them to identify that. It would be easy for me to have them do that. Okay, just erase that. So this allows students to participate in different ways that would not have access. They would not have access to, typically in a face-to-face setting or through asynchronous online instruction. Okay, so next slide. So some examples of some features I've mentioned already would be screen sharing and then using the whiteboard capabilities, where we have the annotation tools to have them actually play live or pre-recorded videos, to have them annotate images, and I've some examples of that. Chat, webcam capabilities, real-time audio communication. So if I could actually talk with my colleague Yvonne, but if I had students or in this case right here, this participants in today's sessions who had a microphone, we could be talking with each other in real time, and as opposed to just typing, although typing is fine too. Now currently there is a feature which we'd love to use, which is user polling. We don't really have that right now. Oh, I see that we're at the end. So I'm going to ask right now, and this is as far as I really wanted to go, if there are any questions from anyone today. I know Cynthia was probably in a hurry, and she said, thank you, great seminar. You're welcome, Cynthia. I know that you've left the session already, but is there anyone else who has a question about either Dr. Johnson's presentation or mine? Okay, I'm not seeing anything come up right now. So I just want to say that we'll follow this up with an email with the link to the recording, so you can come back and listen to the recording if you need to. Also, I will be providing some links to some important websites. I know that Yvonne mentioned cast.org, but I have a few more. And I'll also include a PDF of the video rubrics. Okay. Once again, do we have any questions? I guess not. Well, you are all welcome. Thank you so much. Yvonne, do you want to say anything?
Thanks to everybody for participating in our session, and we hope to see you at more of our sessions later. Have a great day.